Welcome to Life Mastery Radio with Todd Allen and Jackie Bailey, the show that dives into the science of higher consciousness with inspiring topics such as abundance, intention, health, manifestation, love, and transformation. Join Todd, Jackie, and their guests of leading authors, speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific. Learn to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery. It's all right here with stories and messages to support your well-being and most evocative dreams. Now, here's your hosts, Todd and Jackie.
Hey, it's another groovy day. And a lot of you already know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. That's because I make it that way. When I get up in the morning, I decide that it's going to be groovy before my feet hit the floor. And that's the way I take off. Now, something might happen, something might change, but I always think back. Hey, I started out with a groovy day. I can groovitize. There's my new word for the day. I can groovitize the rest of the day with whatever's going on. So that's how I do it. It's also a groovy day because I get to hang out with one of my closest friends, co-host, mentor. What else? Jackie Bailey. Hi, Jackie.
Hey, hi. Don't forget president of the board.
Oh, president of the board, the Speak Feed Lead org.
That's right.
Yeah. We've just been, and we're pots. We're just pots.
Plain old toast people.
I see our good friend Kyle Hall. Shout out to Kyle Hall. He has it in his header now that he's just a pot. Only a select few people know that. But Jackie,
I'm not sure I want to be a plain old anything. I don't really want to be old.
I agree. I concur. And it's groovy because it's Life Mastery Radio Day. Jackie and I spend a lot of time searching out guests that have inspiring thoughts and ideas for you to use on your very own life mastery journey. I want to remind our listeners that today's show page is at www.lifemasteryradio.net or .com, whichever one you prefer. And any links that we talk about on the show today, you can find there. And so you don't have to worry about writing it down today. You know exactly where to go. But while you go there, you could sign up for our newsletter. Then you'd be informed everything Life Mastery, who's been on the show, who's coming on the show, and a blog post Jackie does every week about the show. Sign up for the newsletter on the website. If you look down just a little bit, then you'll see this really cool book. You can't get it. And it's right side up. 6 Keys to Life Mastery. It's a really cool book, 6 keys. And the master key, of course, is gratitude. You can find out more by checking out that book and leaving me some feedback. And Jackie's book is there too. She has a book, Self-Centered Leadership. And she wrote that book, so then I had to write a book. Let's see, am I forgetting? I don't think I'm forgetting anything other than to check in with Jackie on how things are going with the kids and opening up their hearts.
Hey, things are going. We've got lots of projects in the works, lots of things happening, classes starting all the time. We've got a couple of classes starting next week. We've got summer camps that are out there, and we've started to enroll kids in our summer camps that will be in person for the first time in more than 2 years. We're going to actually have kids at the studio. Yay! I know it's going to be fun. 4 weeks of different activities and specific learning skill sets that they'll take away. And
you're going to prep them to do TED Talks, aren't you?
We are. One of those weeks is a TED Talk in a week. So we're going to talk about what does it take to make a TED Talk, and how do you decide on the message you want to give on a TED stage. We'll walk through the process of how do you apply to be a TED speaker. What do you have to have, under your belt to be able to do that? And then by the end of the week, they'll have their speech written, and we'll see if we can't help them to get those applications done as well.
I might need some of that training. I cannot visualize speaking and standing in the same place.
They actually have a circle on the floor that you have to stand in. I know.
Now, my mentored teacher, she would do that. She was only like 5 foot with 6-inch heels. I don't think they were 6-inch, but she would just stand in one place and
Well, you know what? I think it depends on the event organizer, because I have seen some TED speakers move around more than others. But I think it depends on who's organizing the particular event.
And I'm articulate, I'm articulate, and I really personally like to interact with the audience, because that's what really brings my content out of my heart and through my speaker box and out into the world. So I guess I would have to practice, huh?
Absolutely. Well, and the way that I look at TED Talks, it's different than other speeches, because it's like, I have a solution. Here's a problem, and I have a solution for it. That's what a TED Talk is, in my opinion.
That's the shelf-help industry.
Yeah.
You have a problem, and I have the solution. It's right here in my book. All you got to do is read my book, and I'll fix you.
Yeah. But my understanding is there's a lot of very specific rules that you have to adhere to when you sign on to be a TED speaker. So
that's right. Or when you win the privilege, right? I think
that's right.
Yeah,
it's definitely an audition for sure.
Yeah. Well, enough about that. You can find out more about Jackie's programs for kids at speakfeedlead.org. Check it out. It's amazing to empower a kid or a young adult to find their voice and then to speak it and be articulated with that. So it's really cool, very empowering, and that's a lifelong investment as far as I'm concerned. She's training.
Last week we had one of our groups, that's a middle school group. They do a podcast. In the first 8 weeks that we're together, they actually develop a podcast. And one of our students is into football, and he wanted to interview an NFL player.
Oh,
and
wow.
We tried. There was a couple that he had specifically in mind, and we tried, and a couple of people didn't get back to us. But I got a hold of someone that I know through someone else, and he was able to come on and be his guest. He used to play for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he played for the Tennessee Titans. And now he's a coach at San Diego State. But he knows the players that my student of mine was trying to get a hold of. So now when he does his second podcast episode, he's got the inside scoop to how to get in touch with these people. So it's amazing that these kids get opportunity to speak to these heroes that they would never otherwise get opportunity to have a conversation with. So it's
that right there is very empowering on how, you can have a dream, vision, and goal, and it takes certain steps, but you just keep moving forward, and who knows what is going to open up. And instead of cowering down, tail between your legs, head down, you got to be up, ready to go, tail wagging, and those opportunities come your way. So that's a very cool testimony.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay. You ready for a really big show?
Ready.
I think we have a really cool guest today. Our guest today is Ann Papayoti. Did I say that right, Ann?
You did.
Papayoti. Papayoti. Ann is an international life, leadership, and relationship coach. She is an International Coach Federation accredited professional certified coach and a member of the Association of Integrative Psychology, dedicated to waking people up to living their best life by helping them untangle from their past, and further helps them align with their values and connect to their higher purpose, and inspires people by sharing her personal experience of loss, transition, and triumph, and is especially known for the personal and compassionate ways she guides people to their own insights and growth. Open the door. That's what she does. And you can find out more about Ann at skyviewcoaching.com. The link is on lifemasteryradio.net, today's show page, so you can just kick back and enjoy. Ann wrote a book, and the name of the book is The Gift of Shift. Discover the key within to unlock your best life. And this book is Ann's gift to those who are struggling with life's unforeseen consequences and fear of what's ahead. She knows how easy change can be once you embrace it. You just have to embrace it, right? With the challenge, and set your course for a lighter heart, an alternative emotion, and surrender within the moment. Now that I put you on a pedestal, Ann, how are you, my friend?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing well. How are you? And how are you, Jackie?
Great, really great. It's
I am
wonderful to have
groovy.
you.
I'm groovy because I started off my day groovy, and now I have some really groovy people to talk to. So
I heard that, and I'm going to borrow the word groovitize that you offered today because I just love that. I'm going to take that.
I'm going to groovitize it.
Groovitize everything.
Yeah. I think
Jackie,
I think I come up with a new word every week. So it's whatever pops into mind.
I like that. I like that a lot. And Jackie, I want to be a kid again and come to your program
Oh,
and enroll. It just sounds amazing. And like you, Todd, I was thinking when you said that, I don't know if I could stand in one spot. When I have a podium, yes, but without a podium, I was a journalism major at university, and therefore I was a speech minor. It was just the way it worked. And for public speaking, we were taught to work the stage.
right.
Work the
We
audience.
had to stand center and then go left and then transverse right. And back center. So I can't imagine. I have not yet done a TEDx talk, but that is in my I think in my goal.
Well, then here we are, and these days, and everybody's on a little video camera, right?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
the stages have completely changed around. So now we have to either stand or sit within 2 or 3 feet of everything.
Exactly.
And there's a whole new learning set, new skills to be learned just to be able to do it this way. Oh my gosh, it's
Completely.
So, and you came up with this book. Was this book in you for a while? Did you know it? Or I guess you have a co-writer, and her name is Tracey MacDonald. We want to give a big shout out to Tracey because she co-wrote the Gift of Shift. Yes, but did you know this was in you?
Absolutely not. I did not. I knew that a book was in me since I was 17, actually several books. But I always thought I'd be a novelist. But life took me down a different path. And it was during life coach training that Tracey and I actually met, and we just gravitated to one another, kind of really magnetic. And we knew we wanted to do something together. And we met in Miami, but we both lived in Canada at the time. And I was in the province of Quebec and she in New Brunswick. But we knew that we both shared this love of personal development and the power of perspective. And we started collaborating on creating content. And we created workshops together. And we created one under the title of The Gift of Shift. And we would travel to one another's provinces and hometowns to do and deliver these workshops. And then we created, different ones. And I kept pushing her. I said, we should write a book, because this was my dream, right? To write a book. And I realized these novels, I had pieces and parts and chapters written, and yet I just had not pushed myself to complete that dream. I will, though. That's another dream. TEDx talk in a novel. That will happen. But Tracey said no, that she's not a writer. It's not what she wanted to do. But one day she came back to me after having been at a yoga class and meditating. And she said she had the universal download that told her, yes, write the book. And the book would be The Gift of Shift. And so she called me. And of course, I was thrilled. And I have to give Tracey credit. I probably still would not have my first book if not for Tracey saying yes, because we did this, because I would still be focused on a novel. Although I had said, Tracey, I feel like we collaborate so well, we could do a book. What we did, though, is we took the workshop and we turned it upside down on its head. And we took things from the workshop and I said, no, people struggle with self-help books. They find them too academic. This is what I get, because I've taught personal development for decades. And I said, people always tell me that what they learn from were when I would share personal stories. So that's when we changed the direction of really where we were going with it. And we agreed to actually make this a collection of personal stories, add the teaching element, but really make it for the reader by then adding these coaching questions after each story so the reader could reflect on how the theme of the story had played out in their lives.
Yeah, personal stories inspire people. It's the magic. And as humans, we've been telling stories since we were sitting around a campfire talking to each other, right? That's just the way you inspire people.
And how did you begin collecting these stories that became the chapters of your book?
For me, it was easier than it was for Tracey, but we started talking about themes in our practices and things that people experience. For me, I sort of went through this journey of including one about, because as we all do, I have many more stories that I did not share in the book, but I went through really the first experience in my life that I would consider emotionally traumatic.
Yeah.
And that sort of led to the next and the next and the next. And so I sort of went through sort of a linear journey for my life that included each of the major players in my life. Tracey had not had large or huge emotional traumatic experiences. And we didn't want this to be all about that, but we wanted it to be about things everyone experiences, whether it's betrayal or having to find courage or hold on to hope for something, or having to choose forgiveness at some point in our lives, dealing with that inner critic we all have, choosing yourself, saying I do to you before you could to someone else. So all of these things that we all have experienced in life, and we chose these things, and then we said, okay, how has that played out in our life? And we each had a story, of course, and we could have each written each other's chapter in some way. And, and like the forgiveness one, we could have arm wrestled over, but
you know, I was reviewing your book and reviewing the stories, and these are stories about adversity and then the overcoming of adversity. But I'm reading this and I'm thinking of an old teaching story about a father and a daughter that were walking through the barn. And the father opened up the door, and here's this room full of pony poop. Nothing but pony poop. And the kid instantly jumps in there and starts digging through it. And the father's like, what are you doing? That's crazy. She goes, oh, no, Dad, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere.
Love that perspective, right?
I know, but that's what we're talking about, right? You know, I was taught during adversity to instantly stop, you know, pay attention and look for the gift. And that's really hard to do. And you have to just really push back and prevent yourself from reacting. Is that the teaching that you were trying to get across?
I think the teaching is to stop and reflect. Stop and reflect. And then you can choose a response. Because we're all going to react when something bad happens. We're all going to react. That's natural. That's that survival, instinctive. We're going to feel victimized or in conflict with something that is adverse. We just are. You know, undesirable things happen to all of us, and we experience painful emotions. It's how we either withhold or express those emotions that create our individual and unique experiences from that point. But it's then when we create that awareness around how we're creating our experience. You know, we can't change the circumstance,
right?
But we can change how we experience it. Once we're aware, then we can reflect. And I share a story, The Gift of Buoyancy, in the book. And I talk about how my dad taught me how to swim in a lake back home in Alabama. And I was so excited to learn how to swim because that meant I could go hang out with the older kids in the deeper part. And that's where the diving platforms were. And, it's just a cooler place to be. And they played games in that area. But he insisted I learn how to float first. And I was impatient. You're going to learn how to float before you learn how to swim, because if you only learn how to swim, you're going to wear out, tire out, sink, and possibly drown. And I had no idea how important that lesson would be, not only to my life, but to my life's work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the point. If we're just keep swimming, we're just focused on what's right in front of us, what's right ahead of us, possibly what's below us. But if we stop and float and reflect, when you're on your back in the water, you've got the whole sky above you. Your ears are below water. You hear your breath. You hear your heartbeat. It's serene. You can reconnect. You can recharge. You can refresh. And then you can choose a direction to swim in that's right for you. And for me, the way I started the book, my first story was about betrayal by a good friend in college. And before that, I'd had a very happy childhood. I didn't have emotional trauma. I was one of these people, I would have thrived in Jackie's program. I was that person that was looking to learn and grow and excel. I was, sat on the front row in school and, was the quiet child, but the teacher's pet just because I did well. I was the one that was asked to help others who were struggling. And that was just me. And I was a planner and a structured person and a box checker and all of this. And so there were some things I had to do twice, like, tried out for the high stepper in high school. And I didn't make it the first time, but I didn't let that set me back. I just went out again the next year. Then I made it. So I was that kind of person. So I got to university. So I think I was 20 years old when my best girlfriend betrayed me with the guy I thought I was going to marry. So this was like a double-edged kind of thing that just turned my world upside down. And rather than go through the pain and grieve that and keep going in a healthy way, like I did when I didn't make high stepper in high school, grieved it, got it back up, went out the next year, I didn't know how to navigate this. Because everything I'd learned in childhood about be kind, people will be kind to you, the golden rule, all those wonderful things wasn't applying here. And I couldn't understand it. And trust was broken. And I didn't know how to rebuild it. And the questions I was asking weren't getting answered. So I turned it into me. It must be me.
Yeah.
It must be about me. Now, when I answered those questions, I answered with negative responses. Well, you must not be a good enough friend. You must not be kind enough. You must not be pretty enough for him. You must not be a good enough friend. All of these things. And then when you believe something, we collect evidence to support it.
Yep.
So I'd go back and I'd look for these things and I'd compare myself. And so then what do? I make sure those beliefs are true. So I started my over-under behaviors. Overate, overdrank, underperformed, underachieved. I began self-betraying, self-sabotaging, failing academically, not showing up socially, totally not being myself. And that started this series of, rather than stopping and floating and reflecting like I did when I didn't make high stepper and grieving and then pulling myself up, floating, figuring out what to do and moving forward and swimming towards, let me do better, let me improve. I did start swimming. I didn't fully hit the bottom of the lake that I hated to touch because it's mushy, gross, and ucky.
Muddy.
Yeah, I wasn't going to get stuck in the bottom and like some people do. I was thrashing in the water. Let's call it that. I started swimming, but I swam and got in the first boat because I was exhausted because I never took time to float.
Right.
And the first boat was the next toxic relationship, which happened to be, I don't talk about this in the book, but there were a few toxic girlfriends that just took advantage of me because I'm trying to prove I can be a good friend. Then the next boat was an abusive marriage.
That's a great
In
metaphor.
that marriage, I lost my first child. But in that loss is when I started reconnecting. There was a trigger point for me and a reconnection, and I started finding myself again, but not fully until the second child was born. And in the birth of that second child, and I'm starting to get ready for change. And I believe that there's a time when we're ready for change and opportunity cross paths that we take action. So I was being prepared after the loss of my first son. And I talk about his story in The Gift of Charlie Brown and finding the true meaning of things like Charlie Brown does with the true meaning of Christmas.
Good grief.
Good grief is right. And it was learning how to grieve. And when I got here and my second son as a toddler, who has always known who he was, and at 22 months stood between me and his 6'4" father, and I'm 5'3" if I stretch, said, "No, Dada, no, Mama, Dada, bad," as he's yelling at me, sweating the small stuff as he always did. And I was numb at this point, because, it's kind of like when you're in cold water for so long, you become numb. And that's kind of where I was, even though I was internally getting ready. It just wasn't quite there. But when he did that, that's when those 2 points crossed for me: ready and opportunity for change. And that's when I metaphorically had been standing on this diving board, not allowed to go down the stairs and get off, but shivering on top, scared to dive or jump. But when that happened, I did. And I was frightened and exhilarated at the same time when I did it. And that's courage. And I talk about that in the Gift of Grits. Courage is in spite of fear, you do what must be done. And that's when I did it. And I did it in that moment. And that's when I left my marriage. So there are all these things, and there's gifts in them when we finally choose change.
It's interesting. You described desperation, and it's been my experience that people don't really change, right? They don't really come to that point where the opportunity is knocking and they recognize it until there's some extreme desperation, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And I think with a book like yours and examples of these stories, people can get that insight. That's why stories are so powerful.
Absolutely. Our goal of sharing our stories was so that people could reflect by answering these questions. Again, hopefully their story's not the same as ours. Most likely it's not, though I've had a few people reach out to me because their story was quite similar to mine in a few of the stories. But the goal is for them to reflect, and maybe they're beyond it already, but to be reminded of a strength or a character trait that got them through that, so that they could use that to help them through a current challenge, because there's always another storm, isn't there? Their change is going to come again. The opportunity.
But there's a pony in there.
There's going to be a pile of crap again. Let's just say that there's going to be another barn pile of crap. So it's going to come, so they can be reminded, because we forget our strengths.
Well, each chapter of the book, we just want to qualify that. After each chapter, you have some questions. And I even noticed after one chapter, you had people, there was a space to put their picture there.
Every chapter.
Is it? Okay.
After every chapter, there are the 5 questions, and then there are lined pages to write their story, so they can rewrite it now. Rewrite your story now that you have reflected. Now rewrite your story.
Yeah, that's empowering.
Take it on. And because a lot of people that I've learned through working in self-development and with support groups for decades now, is that they don't know how to initiate that change sometimes. Maybe they have the desire, but they don't know the how to. So people say, well, journaling's a great way, get your story out. They're like, they don't know where to start. So the questions are like the prompts to get them going. So the questions become the outline for them now to rewrite their story in a more empowering way. So what Tracey and I do when we share our stories, we show how we went from more powerless, negative ways of thinking and feeling and being, showing up in life, to we show our transition, we show our change, we show where in a moment we chose change. And the circumstance didn't change. We just changed how we looked at it. We changed how we were experiencing life. We went to a powerful way of thinking, feeling, and therefore being. And so when we show that, it tells them they can do it too. And so then we ask these questions of how they've experienced, because we've all went through betrayal. We've all had to find courage for something. So as I was saying before, to remind them of a strength, or perhaps they can recognize, you know what, I really am still carrying this story around. I'm still stuck in it because this is where it's showing up. I have a relationship conflict everywhere I go, whether it's at work or with friends, and it's because of this. And it's to help them gain that awareness so they can work through it and choose change.
That's very cool.
So if I'm understanding then correctly, the title of your book, The Gift of Shift, is about recognizing those situations in our lives where we have the ability to shift our thinking, to shift our choices, to shift relationships, shift the environment we're in. And do we see the gift at that point in this circumstance that we've been going through? Or do we first have to see the gift of what we're going through in order to make the shift? Which comes first, the shift or the gift, in other words?
I love that question.
Which
Jackie, I think the shift comes first. In my experience, the shift comes and then the gift, because that's when you can. So you choose the change, and then you go, wow, there it is. There it is. So the gift is always there. You got to choose to open it. And that's why we put a gift box on the cover. It's sitting there for you, but you got to choose to open it. And when you make that choice, so you shift over here, okay, there it is. Wow. And it's not always a big shift. It's not always a big shift. It can be, rather than letting something victimize you, keep you helpless or hopeless or defeated in life, or keep you in frustrated or feeling humiliated, just to choose, and it sounds like, and it can be a lot, and some people need more guidance, and that's why there are coaches in the world, and that's why there are therapists, that's why there are programs, and this is why we do the work that we all do, and write the books we all write. Is to help guide people beyond this. So if anyone's listening and you need more help, do reach out, because that's what I did. Yeah. Now it's put me on a path somewhere else. And you cannot help yourself when you help somebody else. And I can tell you, the way I got started was I went to a support group for me. And from there, because I happened to be in the corporate world in training and facilitation, they just saw I had a skill set. And they said, we're passing the torch, and we want you to now guide the support group, lead it. I'm like, I'm not healed. And they said, that's okay. You are on your journey, and you will continue healing as you lead others. And that's what I've done now for 25 years, which then just kept morphing into more and more and more. So it's not a weakness to ask for help. It is a strength. And that's the other thing that I learned. I also learned anything anybody says or does from that first betrayal, which started my little journey of self-loathing, self-punishment, self-defeat, was I made it about me. It wasn't. I had to go from being victimized and or in conflict, which my default was victim, not conflict. I had to my first shift was to go from that to taking responsibility for my life. And to do that, I had to choose forgiveness. And it wasn't about forgiving them, because their choices weren't about me anyway. I had to forgive me for having ever thought it was. I had to forgive me for my choices. And that's about letting go. And I think all lessons are about letting go at the end of the day. Anyway.
I want to quickly remind our listeners that you're tuned into Life Mastery Radio with Todd. I'm Todd, and that's Jackie. And our guest today is Ann Papayoti, and she has a book. Cue for Ann to hold up her book. She has a book called The Gift of Shift that we're talking about today. We're talking about all things about that and telling stories, and it's Discover the Key Within to Unlock Your Best Life. Very cool cover, and she's excited about it. Look at that smile on her face. It's her little project that is just growing, and I think it's really cool. It's a great book, and it will get you to reflect and find that introspection that a lot of us are looking for. So, Ann, the book has been out for a little while. I think it came out you've been working on it for a couple of years, but it came out in December
2020. Yeah, it's when it published.
So share with us, have you gotten any great feedback or some testimonials from people that stand out that you could share with us?
Absolutely. There are some beautiful ones on Amazon that I've read,
Oh,
and Barnes and Noble and a few other places that just bring a smile to my face and a tear to my eye out of joy. But there's one that someone shared with me privately recently that was really touching. And that was someone who read the book and then bought one for their sister. It was a gentleman actually. And he said that it helped her release something that she's in her 50s and she'd been carrying this since high school. And that it had affected her on such a deep level and had kept her isolated in a way that socially, and had kept her from trusting people. I mean, she'd gone on with her life. On the outside, it looked like everything was fine. But on the inside, he said it was something that just always, they say it'll eat you up inside. He said it really helped her finally
break free,
start letting go.
Oh.
And she'd never sought help because it was something she felt such shame over. She had never even been willing to seek help for. And something Tracey and I do is, and people can find it in the book, we have a page called A Note from the Authors, is we lead we have a private Facebook group, and we lead a monthly chapter discussion so that readers can come to a private community where there are like-minded people, and we can talk about the things and talk about their shifts and their stories of shift and how they've experienced these things and how they've worked through them. So it's almost like a support group. And it's,
well, that's a big part of it, isn't it, Ann? Is talking about it and getting it out. I mean,
yes,
if it's held up inside and nobody knows about it, I mean, that's the first step, I think, is getting it out there and finding somebody that you trust that you could share that with.
that's right. And I think in that part of this whole thing about sharing your story is revealing it, because we can't change what we don't first acknowledge. And I think that's what some of our readers have told us, is that by reading our story, it's kind of like that whole Me Too movement. They go, oh my gosh, me too. And I've just I never thought it mattered. And I realized it does matter. And I do need to. And so sometimes we hear our truth in someone else's story. Is that,
sometimes I get that question about my book. Todd, wasn't it really hard for you to share your insights and your stories? Wasn't it that, how could you just put that out there for everybody to see? And I thought, that's how you inspire people, and that's how you lead people to change, is if they see that somebody else went through that.
I totally agree. And that I've just learned that what I found in writing it was a little harder to put it in writing. I've always shared it speaking, out loud, in groups, in settings. I've never had a problem because I could see their faces. I knew the transformation. I knew the encouragement, and I could interact with them. So
Right.
Putting it in writing was a little more vulnerable for me personally, and putting it out there, and then the wait and see. And I hope, but then as the testimonials started coming in, or the emails that people would reach out. Yeah. And
well, Ann, I don't know if this is one of the stories in your book, but you had an experience that could actually be a metaphor to many experiences that we all have or face, is that you were bitten by a poisonous snake.
Yeah.
And that poison caused a chronic illness for you, right? I mean, that's metaphorically what happens to each one of us when we have an experience that causes a lot of pain. So Can you tell us a little bit about that, and what was the shift that you had to make in order to rid yourself of that poison?
Yes, absolutely. And that is not in the book. Had I won the metaphorical arm wrestle with Tracey, that would have been my story for forgiveness. But when I experienced that, I realized everything we'd always heard about harboring unforgiveness, about holding on to the poison
Mhm.
and expecting the other person to die, right?
Mm.
We've always heard that. And here I was literally harboring poison toxins in my body and watching my body wither. And there was nothing the medical community could do because I was beyond the anti-venom. There's a time frame that can give you that.
Were you in the desert, or where did this happen?
I was back home in Alabama, and
Oh.
just on my mom's property. I was actually going to the barn to get some, not pony poop, but looking for some high school memorabilia because we were getting ready to plan a high school reunion, and I was just carrying I didn't see it, thank goodness, or I would have done a happy dance and probably gotten multiple strikes. So it was a copperhead, and because they strike once as a warning, like a rattlesnake would rattle as a warning, they assumed I'd gotten a warning strike and therefore a low dose of venom. So when I went to the medical center, they gave me a tetanus shot for the fangs, for the bacteria in the fangs, but not the anti-venom. Gave me what I should come back for if I saw these certain signs, but I never had those signs. So 2 weeks later, I'm back home in Montreal. No poisonous snakes on the island of Montreal. But I started with headaches and migraines. And anyway, I started with neurological. Nobody connected it to snake bite. Then I started having cardiological, a couple of weeks later. It came in stages. It didn't seem connected. Then respiratory. The poison was attacking the systems it's designed to attack, but in these weird ways at different times. And then I'm completely breaking down. My body's breaking down from the inside out. And the medical community couldn't figure it out. And every time they'd ask me if anything strange had happened, I'd say, well, I was back in July, I was bitten by a poisonous snake. Well, by now it's October, and I'm just literally, it's like a flower not being watered. I was withering away.
Wow, that's crazy.
And very painful, and lots of specialists, and nobody could figure it out. But when it comes to, had this been in the book, I would have been talking about what it's like to harbor unforgiveness. We say it'll eat you up inside. We say it's like drinking the poison, expecting another person to die. That's what it's like. And I remember thinking that this is what they mean. This is what it's like. Because everybody else was living their life, and I'm at home just like, couldn't wash my hair. I couldn't sleep. My head couldn't touch a pillow. That's what people go through. Eventually, for me to actually start healing from this, it took a holistic healer. It took an osteopath, not in the way they're trained in the States. She was trained in France. It's very different. And it was just these small little things, but my spinal fluid was frozen. My brain, our brain is supposed to float. It was like it was encased in cement. So it was extremely painful. And she did some very minor little manipulations that looked like this, it's just little touches, but she unlocked that. And as my brain could float, and as my spine could move, it unlocked it. It took about 3 treatments, and I was free from the pain.
Wow.
And I had to build my body back. I'd lost all my muscles, had atrophied, and a lot of other things. They thought I had adult onset asthma. I couldn't breathe. I was like, I couldn't go up and down my steps without sitting down, whereas I used to walk 4 kilometers a day with my dog. There were a lot. I had to rebuild my stamina and my muscles.
Wow.
A lot of things, but for me, it's the example of harboring unforgiveness. It will eat you up inside. You're the one who's losing. And to let go is healing. Once I got that release, I started healing, and I was able to rebuild my life and rebuild my stamina. So when people can do that, it's not about the other person. It's not condoning what they did. It's not excusing them. Doesn't have to be spoken to them. It's letting it go, releasing it. So you can breathe again.
Right.
Wow, what a story. That's amazing. But it definitely makes for a great metaphor, and you it's very empowering, and it seems like you've latched onto it as a great story.
Yeah. what else was I going to do with it? Of course, my brother said the snake that bit me he was sure dead because it had my blood in him. Of course, that's brother sister stuff.
Oh, sure. A brother would say that. That's for sure.
Yes, he would.
Well, that's
Poor
interesting
snake.
that they didn't give you the anti-venom when you were there. Did they just figure that there was so little venom that you got that it wasn't necessary?
Yeah, they assumed because it was a warning strike since I was only bitten once, but they have changed their policy because of my case.
Yeah,
Because
thank goodness.
I had a delayed onset 2 weeks later. So, it affects everybody differently, just like everything, right?
Well, and probably because you were in such good shape when it happened that it did allow your body some time to fight it, but that at some point the venom was much more than your body could continue to fight. And
Exactly.
so
It's just, it's amazing. And I wonder how many people have permanent damage from something that was never treated or never discovered and related to something.
Especially forgiveness. Forgiveness.
Yes,
I mean,
especially on forgiveness. How delayed is it? And how has it lingered in your life and affected you? And affected you physically? Because I believe, energetically, something happened in the past. But how is it still happening energetically for you? Because it's still happening here. And then it affects you at the cellular level. So
yeah, Louise Hay wrote volumes on that.
she's on my shelf. Yeah. I pull it out with clients. I say, what's that thought again? Hold on.
Yeah.
There's a hurting. Hold on.
Yeah. There's some real truth to that. And yeah, it's amazing. So we just have about 9 minutes left. Anne, is there anything, we've talked about some really cool things. I've just had a blast. This is very informative. I think it's a really cool book. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you would like to share with our audience?
Just that to notice what has a grip on their heart. Right. So and Tracey and I start the book with her chapter, The Gift of Sync, not the band. And it's about noticing life and the synchronicities of life. And so it starts with really your belief system. And do you think things are coincidences or synchronicities? That's a choice, but just to notice life. So, and then pay attention. What has a grip on your heart? Is it pulling you into a negative and powerless way? Is there something that's pulling you to something positive, but there's something stopping you? So ask yourself the questions. That's what's stopping you. Is there some kind of fear? And then is that a conscious-based fear? Is it something from culture, from religion? I let religion keep me in a marriage that was abusive. Because I believed, I said, I do for better or worse. Literally, I said, well, I got worse. I do.
So is the chapter Gift of Breaking Free, is that about your marriage or is it about something else?
That one's actually the forgiveness chapter.
Okay.
So the gift of grits, I don't go into a full thing about the marriage, but that's the one about leaving the marriage. Now, the last chapter, The Gift of Beautiful, is about being true to yourself. That's about my current marriage and a healthy marriage, but to still be living your best life, being true to you, even in a good and healthy relationship, whether it's marriage or not. There are things that build up and create bitterness in relationships. I do a lot with separation, divorce, and just relationship conflict, whether it's business or personal. And we have to know who we are and what we stand for. And I talk in that last chapter, this is my lightest chapter, but I talk about how my husband and I have, all the deal breaker values are covered. We're fine. We're good. He's Greek. I'm Alabama, but we are family, moral, ethically, we match. Okay. But we found out we have this value that doesn't match. And it's called on time.
I think a lot of couples have
on time. He is, for me, I learned that if I'm not early, I am late.
You're not minutes early, you're late.
Okay.
That's what I was taught.
Yeah. So yeah, my dad said, if you're not early, you're already late. And Basil's like, he's Mediterranean, you show up, within the hour after you're invited, whatever.
Yeah.
So I talk about, I used to just pace like a lioness in a cage while he gets in the shower at the time we're supposed to leave.
Right.
So I allowed this to frustrate me, and this bitter, him being true to himself while I'm denying being true to myself. So I had to learn to just be me and do me and let him be him and do him. And I did this at a wedding where I just left him at the hotel and went on in the shuttle and went to the wedding on time and left him napping. And he shows up like a groom left at the altar. And then we learned from that point, okay, if he can step it up for things of higher importance, and I could relax for things like going to the movies and sit in the front row like this with us. We're gonna be like, but so we had to learn to allow each other to be one another and find that compromise, because a lot of people allow that divide to happen, or that mountain to create in between them over what shouldn't be a deal breaker value.
Nice.
So tell us a little bit about what people can find on your website. I mean, you counsel couples, you counsel individuals, you do group sessions. Entice us a little bit.
All of that. So I work with one-on-one. I do work with couples. I have people that will come as a small group. So 3 or 4 friends will get together who are kind of in the same boat at the same time, that want to share the time. I also will work with businesses and teams for individual or group coaching as well. And then I do a lot of speaking. So I'll come and do speaking engagements or motivational kind of events. I'll do workshops and facilitation. And like I said, I have support groups. So check out the website. You'll find a lot there. I have a newsletter people can sign up for. I have monthly inspirations there for just everything about growth and change, very similar to you guys' mindset. I love what you're doing, and I appreciate you guys having me on your show today.
And that's skyviewcoaching.com. Is that your website, Ann?
It is. And
Okay.
There's a direct link to the book there. I'll take them straight to Amazon, but they can also find that at any online bookseller, or if they want to support their local bookstore, it can be ordered from the Ingram Sparks catalog.
Nice. Okay, great. Well, I really appreciate the message of your book, and compliments to Tracey as well for working together, collaborating toward providing such an important message to the world. We all need to hear this kind of stuff. Times are only going to get more challenging. It's not going to get easier for anybody. And we have to have that sense of resiliency that comes from past experiences that have taught us everything we need to know for the next challenge that we face, right?
I know there's a pony in there.
There is. And, there's research says that if just emotional trauma in general, that we have to develop a healing resiliency, or we go through life unsatisfied and unhealthy. So it's all about developing
doing the same things over and over again.
Well, that's why the suicide rate among young people went up so much during the pandemic, is because they didn't have that sense of resiliency built up yet. They hadn't had enough life experience to tell them this is going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And so that is another really important lesson for all of us, is that we need to be prepared for these things. And the only way to do that is to see the gift in every experience we've had that has shaped us to who we are. And because we are who we are, we have the ability to get through the next thing.
That's right. That's right. Amen. And I think that that's the beauty in that reflecting. And when I go back, I see, I see it. When you see it, and I do something called soul CPR, and it's all about connecting the dots, how you got to where you are, the celebrations, the good times, but also those little detours, those things that knocked us off our feet. And then
we're definitely going to have you back, Ann, because there's so much more to talk about. And we are out of time. Thank you so much for showing up as you today and sharing your stories. It was wonderful. And I know Jackie and I both had a blast, and I hope you had a blast too.
I did. Thank you so much.
That's about all we have time for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please tell a friend about it. Please check out lifemasteryradio.net. Please check out Ann's book. And lastly, please, please, please make it a great day, because it is all about choice. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Life Mastery Radio. Join Todd Allen and Jackie Bailey and their guests of leading authors, speakers, coaches, and entrepreneurs weekly at 10 a.m. Pacific. Learn to live a peaceful life with intentional mastery through stories and messages to support your well-being and most evocative dreams. Visit their website, www.lifemasteryradio.com. Join their mailing list and be notified about upcoming guests. That's lifemasteryradio.com.